The transmission crackled through the speakers, sharp and desperate. "We've lost contact with the outer sectors. Something's wrong. Something's here." The voice trembled, breaking into static before silence swallowed it whole. Commander Elena Voss gripped the edge of the console, her knuckles white. The words hung in the air, heavy and unshakable. Around her, the rescue team exchanged uneasy glances, the weight of the unknown pressing down on them. The ship's engines hummed as they approached Erebus 9, the distant colony now a shadow against the stars. No lights flickered on its surface, no signals answered their hails. Just an eerie, unbroken stillness. The docking bay loomed ahead, its doors sealed tight, as if the colony itself was holding its breath. "Prepare for entry," Voss ordered, her voice steady but edged with tension. The team moved into position, weapons ready, hearts pounding. Whatever awaited them on the other side, one thing was certain: they were stepping into the unknown. And the silence was only the beginning. The ship shuddered as it touched down on Erebus 9, the landing gear groaning under the weight of the eerie silence that enveloped the colony. The airlock hissed open, releasing a rush of stale, metallic air that clung to the back of their throats. Commander Voss stepped forward, her boots echoing in the vast, empty docking bay. The lights above flickered weakly, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch and twist as if alive. The team moved cautiously, their weapons drawn, scanning the dimly lit corridors for any sign of life or danger. Dr. Kieran, the team's xenobiologist, paused near a wall, his flashlight catching something unusual. Etched into the metal were strange symbols, jagged and angular, unlike anything he'd seen before. He traced a finger over the grooves, his voice barely above a whisper. "These aren't human, they're warnings." The words sent a chill through the group, their unease deepening as the faint sound of a guttural growl echoed from somewhere deep within the colony. The team exchanged tense glances, their grip tightening on their weapons. The growl grew louder, reverberating through the halls like a predator stalking its prey. Commander Voss signaled for silence, her eyes darting toward the source of the sound. "Stay close," she murmured, her voice steady but laced with urgency. "We're not alone here." As they pressed forward, the flickering lights seemed to dim further, plunging sections of the corridor into near darkness. The metallic smell grew stronger, almost overwhelming, as if the air itself was tainted. Dr. Kieran's discovery of the symbols lingered in their minds, a silent reminder that whatever had happened here was far from ordinary. The growl came again, closer this time, and the team froze, their breath held tight in their chests. In the distance, a shadow moved, a fleeting, indistinct shape that vanished as quickly as it appeared. The tension was palpable, each step forward feeling like a gamble. The colony, once a beacon of human ingenuity, now felt like a labyrinth of dread, its walls closing in around them. The team knew they had no choice but to press on, but the question hung heavy in the air. What had they walked into, and more importantly, would they make it out alive? As they rounded a corner, the growl erupted into a deafening roar, and the team braced themselves for what was to come. The silence of Erebus 9 had been shattered, and with it, any illusion of safety. The hunt was on, and they were the prey. The team moved swiftly, their footsteps echoing through the desolate corridors as they regrouped in the central command room. The air was thick with tension, the faint hum of dormant machinery the only sound breaking the oppressive silence. Commander Voss wasted no time, her voice cutting through the stillness. "We need answers. Access the colony's logs now." Dr. Kieran stepped forward, his hands trembling slightly as he activated the console. The screen flickered to life, displaying a distorted video feed. The grainy footage showed the colonists in their final moments, their faces twisted in terror as a shadowy entity moved through the corridors with unnatural speed. One by one, the crew fell, their bodies convulsing before going eerily still. The entity lingered over each victim, its form shifting and writhing like smoke before moving on to the next. Commander Voss's jaw tightened as she watched. "Secure the area, we don't know if that thing is still here." Her words were met with grim nods, the team spreading out to cover the exits. But before they could act, the room plunged into darkness. The lights flickered once, twice, then died completely, leaving them in pitch black. A faint whisper cut through the void, so soft it was almost imperceptible. "You shouldn't have come." The voice was cold, devoid of emotion, and seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. The team froze, their breaths shallow, their hearts pounding. Then came the sound: footsteps, slow and deliberate, echoing in the darkness. "Arm yourselves," Commander Voss barked, her voice sharp with urgency. The team scrambled, their hands fumbling for weapons as the footsteps grew louder, closer. Suddenly, a guttural cry pierced the air, followed by the sound of a struggle. One of the team members, Private Harris, was yanked into the shadows, his screams cut short as if silenced by an unseen force. The remaining team members backed into a tight circle, their weapons trained on the darkness. "Stay together," Commander Voss ordered, her voice steady despite the chaos. But the shadows seemed to close in around them, the entity's presence palpable, its malice radiating through the air. In the distance, the faint glow of the console flickered back to life, casting an eerie light across the room. The distorted video continued to play, showing the entity's relentless advance through the colony. The team knew they were running out of time. Whatever this thing was, it was hunting them, and their only hope was to fight back, or face the same fate as the colonists. As the footsteps drew nearer, the team braced themselves, their resolve hardening. The silence of Erebus 9 had been shattered, and now they were caught in a deadly game of survival. The question was no longer whether they would find answers, it was whether they would live long enough to escape. As the team struggled to restore power, the dim emergency lights flickered weakly, casting long shadows across the command room. The air was heavy with the metallic tang of fear and the faint hum of failing systems. Commander Voss barked orders, her voice cutting through the tension. "We need light and comms back online. Now, Kieran, see if you can access any backup systems." Dr. Kieran moved to a secondary console, his fingers flying over the controls. The screen blinked to life, revealing a maze of encrypted files. "There's something here," he muttered, his voice low. "A hidden directory. It's labeled Project Erebus." The team gathered around as he decrypted the files, the screen filling with research logs, diagrams, and fragmented video footage. The logs painted a chilling picture. The entity wasn't just a predator. It was a parasite, an alien life form that infiltrated its hosts, rewriting their biology and neural pathways. "It's not just killing them," Kieran said, his voice trembling. "It's rewriting them, turning them into something else." The footage showed colonists in various stages of transformation, their bodies contorting, their eyes hollow and lifeless. The entity's tendrils snaked through their veins, pulsing with an unnatural glow. Commander Voss's face hardened as she processed the information. "We have two options," she said, her tone grim. "We destroy the colony, take this thing out with it, or we try to contain it and risk it spreading further." The team exchanged uneasy glances, the weight of the decision pressing down on them. Before they could decide, a low, guttural growl echoed through the room. The team spun around, weapons raised, as the sound grew louder, closer. The emergency lights flickered again, and in the brief flashes of light, they saw them, the infected colonists. Their bodies were twisted, their movements jerky and unnatural. eyes glowed faintly in the darkness, and their mouths hung open in silent screams. "Fall back!" Commander Voss shouted, her voice cutting through the chaos. The team retreated, firing at the advancing hybrids as they scrambled toward the corridor. The infected moved with terrifying speed, their grotesque forms closing in. Dr. Kieran led the way, his tablet still clutched in one hand. "There's a lab deeper in the colony. It might have answers, or at least a way to slow them down." The team followed, their footsteps echoing through the narrow halls as the infected pursued them. The lab was a stark contrast to the rest of the colony, pristine, sterile, and filled with advanced equipment. Dr. Kieran immediately began searching the terminals, his fingers flying over the keys. "This is it," he said, pulling up schematics and data streams. They were studying the entity, trying to find a way to neutralize it, but they didn't finish. They ran out of time. The team barely had a moment to process the information before the door to the lab shuddered under the weight of the infected. The hybrids slammed against the reinforced glass, their distorted faces pressed against the surface, their eyes burning with malevolence. "We can't hold them off forever," one of the team members said, his voice tight with panic. Commander Voss glanced at the schematics on the screen, her mind racing. "We need to buy time. Kieran, can you rig something to slow them down?" Dr. Kieran nodded, already moving to a nearby console. "I can overload the lab's power grid. It'll buy us a few minutes, but it'll also cut off our escape route." "Do it," Voss said without hesitation. "We'll find another way out." As Dr. Kieran worked, the team braced themselves, their weapons trained on the door. The infected continued to pound against the glass, their guttural growls growing louder, more frenzied. The lights flickered once more, and then the lab was plunged into darkness. A moment later, the power surged, and the door's locking mechanism engaged with a loud clang. The infected howled in frustration, their forms silhouetted against the faint glow of the emergency lights. "Let's move," Commander Voss said, her voice steady despite the chaos. "We're not out of this yet." The team moved deeper into the lab, their footsteps echoing in the silence. The weight of their discovery pressed heavily on them. The entity wasn't just a threat to the colony. It was a threat to everything they knew, and as the infected continued to hunt them, the team realized that their fight for survival had only just begun. As the team pressed deeper into the labyrinthine corridors of Erebus 9, the air grew thicker, the walls vibrating faintly with the hum of the colony's failing systems. The survivors moved with urgency, their breaths shallow, their footsteps echoing in the oppressive silence. The infected were close, too close, and the team knew they were running out of time. Commander Voss led the way, her expression steely despite the chaos. "The reactor core," she said, her voice cutting through the tension. "It's our only chance. If we can overload the system, we might be able to take the entity down with the colony." The reactor core loomed ahead, a massive chamber filled with towering machinery and glowing conduits. The air crackled with energy, the faint hum of the reactor growing louder as they approached. Dr. Kieran immediately set to work, his fingers flying over the control panel as he began the process of destabilizing the core. "We'll need to bypass the safety protocols," he said, his voice tight with concentration. "It's risky, but it's the only way to ensure the overload is complete." The team spread out, securing the area as best they could. The reinforced doors of the reactor core were their only barrier against the infected, but the sound of guttural growls and pounding fists against metal made it clear that barrier wouldn't hold for long. Commander Voss turned to the team, her voice steady but urgent. "We don't have much time. Kieran, focus on the reactor. The rest of you, hold the line. If they break through, we're done." As Dr. Kieran worked, the reactor's hum grew louder, the machinery groaning under the strain. The lights flickered, casting eerie shadows across the chamber. The team braced themselves, their weapons trained on the doors as the infected continued their relentless assault. Then, the unthinkable happened. The doors shuddered, the metal groaning as the infected began to break through. Commander Voss stepped forward, her weapon raised. "I'll hold them off," she said, her voice firm. "You finish this." The team hesitated, but there was no time to argue. Commander Voss moved to the doors, her back to the team as she prepared to face the onslaught. The infected burst through, their grotesque forms surging forward, but Voss stood her ground, her weapon firing in rapid bursts. Dr. Kieran's hands trembled as he worked, the weight of their situation pressing down on him. The reactor systems were failing, the core beginning to destabilize. "It's almost done," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Just a few more seconds." As the reactor's hum reached a deafening crescendo, Dr. Kieran's console lit up with a new alert. A transmission fragmented, distorted, but unmistakable. He froze as the words filled the screen. "We are not invaders, we are evolution." The message sent a chill through the team. The entity wasn't just a parasite, it was something far more insidious. But there was no time to process the revelation. The reactor was reaching critical mass, the chamber shaking violently as the core began to collapse. "Move," Dr. Kieran shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos. The team turned and ran, their footsteps echoing as the reactor's hum turned into a deafening roar. Behind them, Commander Voss's weapon fell silent, her final stand buying them the precious seconds they needed. The corridors blurred as the team raced toward the escape pods, the colony collapsing around them. Walls buckled, ceilings caved in, and the air filled with the acrid smell of burning metal. The infected were everywhere, their guttural growls drowned out by the cacophony of destruction. The escape pods were within sight, but the path was littered with debris and the twisted forms of the infected. The team fought their way through, their movements frantic as the colony's systems failed around them. As they reached the pods, Dr. Kieran hesitated, glancing back at the collapsing colony. The entity's message echoed in his mind, "We are not invaders. We are evolution." The words were a chilling reminder that their fight was far from over. The team piled into the pods, the doors slamming shut just as the reactor reached critical mass. The explosion was blinding, a shockwave ripping through the colony as the escape pods were launched into the void of space. As the pods drifted away, the survivors watched in stunned silence as Erebus 9 was consumed by fire and debris. The colony was gone, but the entity's message lingered, a haunting reminder of the nightmare they had barely escaped. Dr. Kieran leaned back in his seat, his mind racing. The entity's words echoed in his thoughts, a chilling prophecy that left him with more questions than answers. The fight for survival was far from over, and as the pods drifted further into the darkness, the team realized that the true horror had only just begun. As the escape pods drifted further into the cold expanse of space, the survivors sat in stunned silence, their breaths shallow and their minds racing. The blinding flash of Erebus 9 destruction still burned in their vision, a stark reminder of the horrors they had barely escaped. The colony was gone, reduced to nothing more than debris and ash, but the weight of what they had witnessed lingered like a shadow. Dr. Kieran leaned back in his seat, his hands trembling as he stared at the faint glow of the explosion fading into the distance. His thoughts were a whirlwind of fear and disbelief. The entity's message, "We are not invaders, we are evolution," echoed in his mind, a chilling prophecy that left him with more questions than answers. What had they truly faced on Erebus 9? And what did it mean for the rest of humanity? As he rubbed his temples, trying to steady his nerves, something caught his eye. A faint mark on his forearm, barely visible under the dim light of the pod. His breath hitched as he leaned closer, his heart pounding. The mark was unmistakable, a series of intricate symbols, identical to those etched into the walls of the colony. His stomach churned as the realization set in. The entity hadn't just destroyed Erebus 9, it had followed them. The others in the pod were too exhausted to notice. Their heads bowed as they processed the loss of Commander Voss and the horrors they had endured. But Dr. Kieran couldn't shake the growing sense of dread. He glanced around the pod, his eyes darting to every shadow, every flicker of light. Was it already here? Had it infiltrated their ship, their minds, their very bodies? The pod systems hummed softly, a stark contrast to the chaos they had left behind. But the silence was unnerving, a reminder that they were now adrift in the vast emptiness of space, with no guarantee of safety. The entity's words haunted him, a sinister whisper in the back of his mind. Evolution, what did it mean? Was it a threat, a warning, or something far more insidious? As the survivors began to stir, their voices low and filled with exhaustion, Dr. Kieran remained silent, his eyes fixed on the mark on his arm. He knew he should tell the others, but the words caught in his throat. How could he explain something he didn't fully understand? And what if speaking it aloud made it real? The pod's navigation system beeped softly, signaling their approach to the rescue ship. Relief should have washed over them, but instead the atmosphere grew heavier. The survivors exchanged uneasy glances, their faces pale and drawn. They had escaped Erebus 9, but the nightmare wasn't over. It had followed them, a silent, unseen threat that could strike at any moment. As the pod docked with the rescue ship, Dr. Kieran took one last look at the fading remnants of Erebus 9. The colony was gone, but the entity's presence was undeniable. It was out there, somewhere, waiting. And as the survivors stepped onto the rescue ship, they couldn't shake the chilling realization that their fight for survival had only just begun. The final moments of their journey were filled with a haunting silence, broken only by the faint hum of the ship's engines. Dr. Kieran's mark burned faintly under his sleeve, a silent reminder of the horrors they had faced, and the horrors yet to come. The entity's message lingered in the air, a chilling prophecy that left them with one undeniable truth: the nightmare was far from over. As the rescue ship drifted further into the void, the survivors could only wonder what awaited them. The entity had claimed it was evolution, but for humanity, it could only mean one thing: extinction.